crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with the Scrappin' for Less Flavor of the Month card kit. This theme is for the April 2019 is Spring Critters, and I have the full kit, which is the banana split level, but there's also the double dip. And I will be primarily focusing on the double dip ingredients just because I know that's what everyone has, and I will be making 10 cards today. So here I'm just briefly showing you the contents of my kit. They do vary a little bit, like those little embellishment pieces will be different for each person. The pattern papers might be slightly different for different people. But the stamp sets are the same, and the line of paper is the same, so it's going to be very similar in color, and then a lot of the embellishments are the same, like the sequins or the ribbon and stuff that you get. I was excited to work with this kit because of the critters. I love to use critters, and so I knew that I would have fun working with it. And I got started by stamping out a bunch of different images from the kits, because there's like little mini collections, so from the different collections, and then I colored them with my Copic markers. I don't show that just because coloring them takes a while, and there's a lot already going on in a 10 cards 1 kit video. So I do have all the Copic colors written down, and I will make sure that they are posted on the coordinating blog post. So if you're curious what colors I used, you're wanting to use similar colors, you can check that out. So I honestly could not decide what my favorite stamp set was. Those bees from Sunny Studio were adorable, very simple to color and to use. But then the little duck, like all, dressed up for the rain, is just so adorable. It is a lot of work to color, but very, very cute. And then the little froggy was super fun too. So lots of adorable images there to use. And I got started with the kit that featured, I believe it's the one with the frog in it. And it had these papers that, a totally terrific stamp set. So the Spring Fever papers had like little sayings on them. So you could cut apart one 6x6 piece, and it had 6 little sayings on it that were 2x3, I think. Yeah, it should be 2x3. And they seemed to fit well into the sketches. So another thing I like about Scrappin' for Less Flavor of the Month kits is that there's a couple sketches included, and I have a sketch Pinterest board, and I always pull up sketches on my own, but it's cool to see someone, the idea that somebody else picks out the sketches for you is a challenge to me. So I like to try to use the sketches that appeal to someone else as opposed to the ones that naturally appeal to me that seem easy for me to use. So here I'm using the Teresa Collins number 5 sketch that they suggested with the kit. I will use 3 of the 4 sketches. I just really struggle with the Operation Right Home one for some reason. So what's awesome about having coordinated papers is that it was really easy to fit it all together. So I used that 2x3 piece, a slightly bigger rectangle, and a sort of typical card size piece, which would be, a card, I'm using A2 size cards throughout the video. That's what you get when you cut an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper in half. And so my smaller paper is 5.25 by 4. And with those cards too, I did make 2 of them because once I started chopping up the papers, I was able to use multiple pieces. Also, those pattern papers were double-sided. So if I liked one side, I was often able to use the coordinating side for the other card. And so that saves a lot of guesswork and makes the cards a little bit different. Next up, I'm using the frog that I mentioned I previously colored, and I'm using the MFT Weekly Sketch 172 that was included. It has an oval, and it is shown landscape in the sketch, but I have used it portrait style most of the time. And when I cut out the oval, because I did make a couple with this particular sketch, I used my Cat Scrappiness wonky wavy stitched ovals. It's not super clear to see in the video, especially because it's all cut out of pattern paper. However, it did add a little bit of interest to this somewhat simpler sketch. So what I'm doing there is just laying my oval, like I've already decided I'm using the oval, and I'm laying it on top of different pieces of paper from the collection, seeing which one I think works well. And then I'll go to the scraps to find the other two. There's like a square banner piece and then like a more traditional banner piece with a little cut in it. So these are just strips of paper that come down. And when I'm trying to plan this out, I'm like, well, I have two pretty busy pattern papers already. They have multiple colors on them. And so when I pick out these other pieces, I want them to be either like, solid colored. So here they're like both blue and white. There's only one extra color. And I definitely wanted one of them to be a more bold pattern. So that one that's blue with the little tiny white polka dots, I knew that having that more solid pattern, although obviously it's not solid, but it would help balance out all the busy patterns. So if you have a little bit of trouble knowing how pattern paper goes together, if you feel like your card is looking busy, you're going to want to pull in some smaller patterns that are more like a solid. And also you might still be okay with a pattern, but pulling in less colors will make it look less busy. So, hopefully those tips are helpful to you. That's why I talk over my videos. I know it's not for everyone, but I do want to share sort of my thought process behind how I think about pattern papers and things like that, since I know that can be a big part of using up kits. So I want to pop up my little frog here, and I've said this in the past few videos, so you probably have heard this tip before, but instead of using foam tape, I've started taking my scraps of thick white cardstock and taping them together in layers of 2 or 3 and using that as a foam tape of sorts instead. And the thought there is I already have those things. They're already scrap and they're only paper, so it makes the card more recyclable in the end. Whereas like foam, yes, it costs me something. And why spend money on foam when you can spend money on stamps? And it's not as good for the environment. Not that like this is like a super environmental hobby, obviously, but I was just like, it's one little thing I can try to do. So anyway, that's my cheap trick of the day for you. Use extra cardstock instead of using foam tape. Next up, I am moving to a different collection, and this, I try to make like about 3 cards with each collection, which if I did that would work out to 12 cards. But if I kind of set a goal of 3, challenge myself to that many, then I'll know I have enough in the end. And if I get to a collection that's a little harder to work with, I'll already have some extra cards. So this is the Spring Bees Collection 1 with the Just Because stamp set from Sunny Studio. And I am going to be trying to use the Teresa Collins sketch again. A lot of times, I don't use the solid colored cardstock that comes with the collection, especially for card bases. I always kind of figure I have something better to do with it, like I just use white solid colored pieces. But with this one, I wanted to let the card base be a design element. Like a lot of it is showing. So it helped me to incorporate that yellow color. And that is a way that you can add some color and interest without using as much pattern paper. You only get a few sheets of each, which I think is great because a lot of times I'll get a 6x6 pattern paper that I love, and trying to use the whole thing can be difficult. However, a little accidental plug for myself though, if you are interested in learning how to use an entire pack of 6x6 paper, I have many videos on my channel where I use up an entire pack of 6x6 pattern paper just so that you can see it can indeed be done. So I'll try to remember to link some of that below. But, adding that little bit of yellow in the background kind of extended the pattern paper for me. I am using the MFT sketch for this next one, and I again balanced some busy pattern paper with this simple polka dot. And I chose the darker blue because I felt like, I used the simple polka dot and I also used the simple stripe. So pairing those with the busier pattern papers works out pretty well. Also, the stripe allows the sentiment to be read a little bit easier. You do definitely want to think about that when you are choosing what sentiment, like what pattern paper you want to put your sentiment on. Are you actually going to be able to read the sentiment? A lot of times I was also embossing the sentiment with the thought that it would make it stand out a bit more and make it a bit easier to read on a pattern paper. And here I'm using those adorable little bees that are included. So I'm not using any of the ones that I colored up from the Sunny Studio stamp set. I'm just using the cute little bees that came with it. I'm kind of thinking about a visual triangle, and I'm using this cue from the sketch to add those 3 little sequin dots to the top left there. The sequins that I picked were solid. They didn't have the little hole inside of it. So it worked out really well to put a little glue dot behind. But included in the banana split level was the multimedia mat by Ranger, which is super awesome for gluing sequins down. I find that it works pretty well. So if you haven't given that a shot yet, I mean, it's been out for years and years. I think it's high quality and good to use for sequins. Next up, I'm working on the Spring Ducks collection, number 4. And this time I decided to go to the Scrapbook and Cards Today Winter 2016 sketch, which honestly, I would never have picked out to use. I would have totally picked out the MFT sketch and maybe the Teresa Collins, although I don't know if you noticed, but I have yet to incorporate the banner that's in the sketch because that is just, I was like, that's too fussy for me. I'm not one to create a lot of extra embellishments like that. So I did just kind of eliminate it and made the sketch work for me. But this other sketch, the Scrapbook and Cards Today, there's so many layers, which I think looks awesome. And I know a lot of people love that look. And sometimes, people leave comments like, you should add more layers to your cards. They're quite simple. And I think the layers look great, but it's just, when I'm making a lot of cards, it can take a lot of extra time. So something that I just did that might not be super obvious was that when I created that, like, layers of stripes, so there was the background pattern paper, then there was pink cardstock stripe, and then there was the rainbow plaid stripe over it. I felt like that was going to add a lot of bulk to my card, which is not necessarily a big problem. I could still mail it and it's still relatively flat. But I was like wasting a lot of pattern paper behind because I kept covering layers with more layers. So to sort of spare myself some, although again, like, do I need a, inch piece of pink cardstock or do I have plenty in my collection? But regardless, I only glued down the edges of those like diagonal strips there. So that way I could cut away the pink layer and the polka dot layer. And then I had those extra pieces of paper so that I could use them for something else and they weren't just sitting in layers behind. So an easier way of doing that sometimes is like if you're going to you have like one big background piece of paper and then you're only going to leave like an inch border around before your next layer, cutting a shape out of that background paper before you layer your next large piece can help you get a little bit more out of your pattern paper. Which again, with this Scrappin' for Less kit, I do tend to do sometimes just because you only get a few sheets. However, again, I also think that is fine and I'm happy to only get a few sheets and really just use them for all they're worth. I do often, while not in my 10 cards one kit video, I do often use up all or most of the pattern paper from these kits and all or most of the embellishments from these kits. So I don't know, I always wind up feeling like they're a good deal because they are really easy to use. It's just the right amount. It's not too much. It's not a whole 6x6 pattern paper that I have to use till I'm sick of. It's just a couple sheets. So I'm moving on with, another tip that I wanted to share. When I decided what colors to use for my stamps, I looked at the coordinating pattern paper. Now, of course, when you're working with these, you could take your stamps and mix them with any pattern paper in your collection or no pattern paper at all. You could take the Just Ducky stamp, or is that what it's called? Just Ducky? I don't know, the duck stamp. Yeah, it's called Just Ducky. You could take the duck stamp and go mix it with the papers from the bee collection. Of course you could do that. But I like to to keep it easy to create a lot of cards quickly. I like to just make them all coordinate. And, they do usually go together and make sense together. So I use my pattern paper to pick what colors that I want to color my critters or stamps. And it generally worked out. Like here, I think the blue was a little bit off. I think the blue was supposed to be a little bit darker than I wound up coloring my birds, for instance. But if I use that as a jumping off point, I'm much more likely to just kind of be able to put cards together very quickly because everything just coordinates. So this collection is only single-sided, which made it a little bit trickier to work with. And with these birds, I cut them out with my scan and cut. No dies, like no coordinating dies are included with the kit, which keeps the kit at a reasonable price. And I'm always happy with that because I have a scan and cut, but I also don't mind fussy cutting out a few images. But when I did it with my scan and cut, I accidentally cut off the tail. I tried to, it didn't, this machine did not. But when I was trying to carefully peel away the paper or whatever, I accidentally ripped the tail off. So I just kind of trimmed the tail off of the second one, just because ultimately I kind of liked the way that it looked better without the tail. And here I am using my cheapo foam tape that's not really foam tape and it's just layers of cardstock again. The little cut apart pieces or embellishment pieces that come with it are going to be different for each person. So I had ones that I thought might work for a sentiment. And there's also some stickers, which might make your sentiments easy because the stamp set doesn't have any sentiments. But I would also consider that there's a bunch of sentiments in the banana split level. So if you got that, to go there and try to find a sentiment or to look at the other collections. Because while there is a lot of punny things, which personally I adore, I love punny things, you might not. And, you could just go to your collection of stamps and find a simple thank you or something like that to coordinate with these birds. So here, this would have been under that blue piece would have been a great time to get out some of the extra pattern paper. I could cut out a oval or something out of that background flower piece, for instance. I didn't in this case because at the time I wasn't sure how much more pattern paper I needed from this collection. Also here, I kind of wanted to be able to add some birds to it, but the pattern paper is what I used to pick my colors from, and the embellishments were a little bit differently colored. But anyway, that's it for my cards today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, I like to do card kits and 6x6 paper pad tutorials, please subscribe to my channel. I will have a coordinating blog post that includes the Copic colors and includes all these still photos so that you can take a long look at each of the cards and see how they turned out. And you can get linked to some of the other people who crafted with this kit and get their ideas as well. As far as I know, at the time that I'm going to publish this, there are still kits left. So you can check that out. Thank you so much for watching and spending this time with me. Have an awesome day. Bye.